Hi, I'm Terrell Turner. I am the host of the Law and Finance Show. And today we have another great guest on. And one of the questions that really comes up for a lot of lawyers and law firms is, could your life as a lawyer be better? And so we have an amazing guest that we wanted to bring on that definitely works with that question and wrestles with that question a lot, because there are a lot of people who you may love the practice of law, or you may love having a law firm, but you are kind of asking yourself that question is, can my life be better? So I want to bring on our amazing guest, Jess Birken. Welcome to the show, Jess. How are you?
Hey, Terrell, I'm really good. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for asking. And I know as we were talking beforehand, I'm in North Carolina, so I'm a little bit warmer than you are
Oh,
right
yeah,
now.
you lucky dog. It's
What's
cold
the
where I'm sitting. It's Arctic. It's going to be
What's
like
the
minus
temperature where you guys
12.
are?
Oh, we're very unseasonably warm today. It's 26.
Okay.
But tomorrow is promised to be like minus 12. That's just the air temperature, not with the wind, just minus 12. So I'm looking
Oh,
forward to
wow.
that.
Wow. It's one of those things where I was laughing because my wife and I used to live in the Midwest. We met when we lived in the suburbs of Chicago. And like, my wife is originally from Kenya and I grew up in the Carolinas. I was like, why are we still here? Like, neither
Right?
one of
What are
us,
you
like,
doing?
awesome. Well, before we jump into like the topic and that real question that a lot of lawyers are asking themselves, like, can my life be better? Can I still practice law and have a better life? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm one of those lawyers that graduated from law school right before the Great Recession of 2008. So I actually graduated in 2007, and being a child of the 80s, I like watched way too much LA Law and Law and Order growing up, so I just thought I'm going to be a trial lawyer. And it turned out I really hated being in the courtroom and like watching just the gore of humanity that is trial law. So the recession happened. I was 6 months pregnant with my second kid, and I thought, there's no jobs. I hate this. I'm super pregnant. Ain't nobody going to hire me right now anyway. So I went back to school and got a master's in nonprofit management. I worked in-house. Eventually, I got a job in-house at a nonprofit where I was part of like program staff and did legal stuff. And then I ended up leaving and being in private practice, which you could have never convinced me that I would have done that when I graduated and gave it all up to go back to school for my master's. I never thought I would be a practicing attorney, but here I am.
That is quite the journey. I mean, I will say, I had a couple of lawyers on the show, and one of the questions I was curious about, like, when a lady is pregnant and she's practicing law, like, at what point do they stop going into the courtroom? Do they say, you know what, this is just too much, I'm not going in? And someone said that, like, they've had someone go into labor in the courtroom, and I'm just
Hell
like,
yeah. I'm like, who asks that? That's a man's question. We're going in until it's time to deliver that baby. I mean, I had both of my kids. I had my first kid in the middle of second semester of my second year of law school. And
wow.
then, yeah, like, and I missed like a day and I was back. And then,
Oh,
which is a
wow.
little insane. I thought that was normal, but it turns out that's actually like not normal at all. And then I did it again with my second kid because I went back to school and got my master's in nonprofit management. And I was like in class, like I had already, gone through labor and delivery and come home from the hospital. And I'm like in class, and you end up like sweating out all this water weight because you're carrying all this extra water. So I'm just like in class, like it was like a cultural competency class. I'm just like so sweaty and disgusting. And I was like leaning over to my neighbor, like, I'm really sorry. I feel so gross right now. And they were like, you're fine. I'm like, I'm not. I really shouldn't be here. I'm a little bit of an overachiever, Terrell. I don't know if you might have noticed, but yeah.
I mean, the fact that you had the baby while you were in law school, I mean, from everyone that I've talked to, like, my background is accounting and finance. So, like, I don't know what it's like to go to law school. I mean, I know what it was like to go to graduate school and get a master's in accounting, and I can imagine that law school is probably 3 to 5 times much
It's
more
a little
challenging and
intense.
stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that you had a baby in the process to where I'm just like, how did you even focus?
I don't know. I found out later that like other people might take the semester off when you're gonna have the baby. Like that's normal. So yeah, I like to overdo it apparently.
Well, I guess that's a good thing for, for all of the clients that you work with is they know that like, hey, I have an overachiever on my side. Like, hey, it sucks for the other side, but on my side, I have the overachiever.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Also, so now one of the things I'm curious about, you talked about, you had this idea of how the practicing the law experience would be, and you kind of didn't, you realize like, this isn't my deal. I guess at that point, were you kind of questioning whether you should practice law at all, or were you just like,
Oh
hey,
yeah.
maybe there's a different angle of law?
No, I gave up. I I was like, I hate this. This sucks. And there were no jobs. That was my real big thing, right? But I had always thought I was going to be a criminal trial attorney and I just hated it. So it was like, forget it. I'm not going to do it. I mean, I remember being in the courthouse and I was a judge's clerk and I would just get so disturbed by the cases. And I would say, how, to a lawyer that's practicing, trial attorney, be like, how do you deal with this? And like one guy said to me, well, after a while, you just don't care as much anymore. And I was like,
Wow.
no, no, I
Wow.
do not want, like, that is not the life I want to live where I'm just ground down by the system. Like, this is why 19% of attorneys have anxiety and alcoholism and, chemical dependency problems. I was like, this doesn't sound like a good life plan. Yeah.
It's one of those things that I've told someone else, like, knowing what I know now after, doing accounting and, CFO work with lawyers, and I've worked with a lot of family law um, lawyers. And one of the things that I said is like, if I were a counselor, like lawyers would be like my target audience because the amount of stuff that
Oh,
lawyers
we need
deal with
therapy.
and the amount
Yeah.
of drama.
Secondary trauma is real.
Because it's one of those things. I was speaking at a conference once, and I was talking with some of the lawyers, and one of the lawyers who's a judge now, and she said, yeah, she had to take a step back from the family law practice because she was like, after a while, just the weight of every case, she was like, I just couldn't get out of the habit of like carrying so much with me to where she was like, I had to find a way. Like I still love law and the practice of law. I just couldn't do it the same way. So I'm like, I completely understand that after hearing so many stories.
Yeah, I don't do any litigation. I've purposely forgotten all the rules of evidence and I don't go to court in any way anymore. And so when I work with my nonprofit clients, it's all transactional and sort of like conflict resolution before there's a lawsuit. So I'm totally happy there. I'm like, that's good. That's good enough. Nobody's going to
You know,
lose their life or liberty in my work.
I mean, that is awesome to think. It's just like, hey, I know the train wreck of an experience that a trial can go through. My job is to help you before you get to that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Now you talked about, like growing up seeing the Law and Order, and you see all these TV shows. And one of the things that I tell I told my wife is it's like, when you watch television now, I mean, there is like almost an endless number of whether it's cop shows or legal
Yeah.
shows, judges shows. Do you watch any of them now that you've actually lived through the experience?
Okay. Like, don't you just subject it the TV the entire time you're watching like Law and Order now? I completely just subject it. So I actually don't watch hardly any of that anymore. I don't know why. I think I'm on to other things, but like distinctly remember like the years in law school, I was still really heavy into like all the Law and Order shows, and I would just like object at the TV, like Sam Waterston's closing argument. I'd be like, "Objection! Counsel's testifying. You can't do that." Like I don't know how doctors watch the medical shows because I'm sure it's just like complete bogus silliness to them all the time.
I do feel that way for myself a little bit when it comes down to watching Shark Tank. And like
Oh
to
yeah.
other people, they're like, oh man, you must really love Shark Tank. Not really. Because what I find myself doing is talking to the TV when they pitch like how much money they want. I'm like, that's a
You're
valuation of 10 million.
pre-revenue. What are
No,
you doing? Yeah.
just like because I'm like in my day job, some of the stuff that I do is working with entrepreneurs, helping them put together their pitch deck for investors.
Right.
And I'm just like, I would have not said it that way. I wouldn't have done that. And it's just like, you know what? I'm getting too worked up. That's not my client. Let me turn this off.
It's the magic of editing too, right? Like who knows what they took out.
Absolutely. And you know what's funny is I've had a couple of people who've been on Shark Tank. I've had them on one of my other podcasts that I did, and talking to them about some of the behind the scenes stuff, and they told me. And I will say, after hearing that, I was just like, I'm less interested in watching the show.
You're like, now I know how the sausage gets made. No thanks. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, when it came down to your practice, I mean, when you went back into private practice after, I don't want to do this, it's just too much, I want to do something different, and you went and you did something different. But then, like I said, you went back into practice. So what was kind of the thoughts or the decisions that kind of triggered, kind of the somewhat full circle?
Well, I really enjoyed my in-house work, but I also was not able to influence change as much as I wanted. And so like, I knew with my educational background, there was a lot more that I could do, but I couldn't do it from the desk that I was sitting at there. Right. And I didn't really have any upward mobility. So it was like, well, do I want to like continue in this very specific role and kind of like drill down deeper into this one thing? Or do I want to be able to like help lots of nonprofits and do lots of things and make more choices that impact the business because I'm the boss? So for me, like, I get really irritated with like bureaucracy. So I love running my own firm because I don't have to convince anybody. I like literally don't have any business partners right now. And so I don't have to convince anybody why we should use this and not that, or like, should we do cloud computing or have a server in a closet? Like, I just decide. And now that I have staff, of course, I engage them in that process to some degree, but ultimately it's my business. So like I can like pivot or change or decide what happens, which I really love.
Awesome. That's one of those exciting things I think that a lot of lawyers that I've talked to have talked about when it comes down to, having your own firm. Or I'll start with when it comes to working in someone else's firm or someone else's company, there's so much structure that you have to operate within. But then when it comes to your own firm, like I said, the flexibility that you have is a huge plus. Now, the other side of that they talk about is, getting used to, hey, it is my responsibility. How was that part for you?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely notice when you don't get a regular paycheck anymore. I mean, that is definitely an adjustment for sure. If you have a healthy addiction to like fear and excitement, that helps. I mean, I think I'm kidding, but it's serious, right? I mean, you do have to be like the kind of so I do teach a lot of CLE about like technology and lawyering and whatever. And I talk to a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I think I should start a firm that's like this. And it's like, well, but do you actually enjoy the business side or do you just want to be a lawyer? Because if you really don't enjoy making all those business decisions and you don't enjoy sort of like flying by the seat of your pants or feeling incompetent frequently. I don't recommend it. You know, it's like you might be happier being a partner and associate at a different firm. For me, I am curious and I like to learn things, and I don't mind feeling sort of dumb periodically while I try something new. So it's like a great fit. But I think it's not for everybody, you know?
Mhm. No, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the earlier, like I left my full time job back in what, like April of 2020, and one of the early interviews that I did on one of my shows where there's a guy that was running a business. He has about 30 people on his, on his team. It's a technology company. And he was, I asked him like, on the show, like, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs? He was like, don't do it. And then, I mean, of course, he explained, like said, some of the things that you just said, where, and it's one of those things that I think for a lot of people that shock factor of, wow, this is what it's like to actually be the boss. I often wonder, like, do people then reflect and then kind of have a little bit more appreciation for the bosses that they had before now that they've kind of seen it? So, for yourself, you mentioned about like having a team. What was that like in, like, said, of getting to that decision of like, hey, I no longer can do this. I can't wrap my hands around this all myself. So now I need to bring on people. What was that process like for you?
Extremely slow. I think, I mean, as a solo, right? Like you're just sort of living in fear of being responsible for an employee. And as a lawyer, you know, like what the responsibility entails. And there's no breaks from wage and hour law. Like you're just on the hook. So the second you have an employee, it's like, oh, so but also, the other side of that too is like lawyers, like we tend to think that we're like only we can do the thing, whatever it is. Or we minimize the amount of work that's actually involved. Like I talk to so many lawyers that still do their own books. And I'm like, what are you like? Literally, what are you doing? Like, unless you have an accounting degree, stop it. And if you have an accounting degree, stop it. Like you should not be doing your own books. Like somebody who knows how to do that for you can do it in a tenth of the time. B, you're probably doing it wrong. C, there's no checks and balances on you if you're the only one touching it. So stop it. But like the hiring process for me started with an intern, and I just sort of was like, okay, I can do this as a 10-hour a week deal. And I just hired somebody for 10 hours a week. And then eventually it was like, okay, you're running out of time, but still have more stuff to do. So let's put it up to 20 hours a week. And I just got somebody straight out of college. And now she's been with me for like 5 years or something, which is insane that now that I think about it. And she's full time and she's W-2 and like the whole 9 yards. But I started really small because it's scary. And if you're trying to like buy your own groceries, not just pay for somebody else to live. So, there's like a balance, but I think it's kind of one of those things where you have to leap and the net will appear. And I, recently added a paralegal, and, I'm just the kind of person that like, I'm going to try and automate as much as I can and create systems and processes and use like sort of no code solutions to avoid, creating work for a human. So like by the time we hired our paralegal, it was like, okay, we're dying. Like I really can't, like I can't make another Zap. There's no Zap that solves this problem. Like I gotta have a person to help with this. And then I just was like, again, okay, let's start you at 15 hours a week with, the understanding that this will grow. And then now, my paralegal is full time.
Nice, nice. I love it. I love it. And there's so much in that I think that you alluded to. I mean, with just the creating the systems and just really starting small. And I promise to everyone that is listening and watching, I did not pay her to mention about bookkeepers and accountants. I mean,
no, that's all me. Like, do you harp on that all the time? That is hilarious. It's true. Now you've heard it from 2 places and you have to take him seriously.
And and I think it is one of those things, even for that I talk to a lot of lawyers and those that are trying to navigate, that is something you mentioned about like the lawyers having to do it themselves, and something to me now, this is my hypothesis of what has come up is some lawyers that I've talked to, it seems as though it's like, if they systematize it, they would feel like, well, if I systematize this and anyone in my firm can do it, then is it still valuable to the client? I mean, has that been one of those questions that you've seen anybody ask or come up?
I think you're articulating a thing that people don't want to admit out loud, and that's your ego, right? If you're having those thoughts, like, check yourself, because that is like, oh, I would feel so unimportant if I couldn't add this person's business card information to my contacts in Outlook. Like, oh my God, operate at the top of your license, please. Like, your time is better spent actually doing a lawyer thing that nobody but you can do. And people are not paying you for the time it takes to, update your calendar. They're paying you for your insight, for treating them as their advocate, for holding their hand through a really difficult situation, bringing all of your wisdom to the table, having gone through similar situations and giving them great advice. We can never be replaced by robots, because those things can't be replaced. So just go ahead and automate everything that you can and delegate everything that you can, because it doesn't take away anything from what brings value to clients and what makes your work more meaningful to you. And I think, like, that's what makes your lawyer life better, is when you free yourself from all of the garbage that is wasting your time and not being fulfilling, right? Like, I'm sorry, but you are not fulfilled by transcribing by hand, hard coding somebody's contact information from a business card into your Outlook. And nor are you any better off paying your legal secretary $25 an hour to do it. Like, just automate that stuff.
No, I absolutely love it. I love it. And one of the things that, I'm very curious about it also is, if people are willing to, they're interested in getting in touch with you. Like I said, they love a lot of the value and the great things that you've said. And also if they need, services, like, where can they find you online or on social media?
Yeah, so I'm big on tax Twitter. So if you are on Twitter and you're into like legal tech or the IRS, you can find me at Jess Birken, just my name, like it says on the screen. And then if you're a lawyer or somebody who knows lawyers, my sort of passion project is hackyourpractice.lawyer. And I have a little pen pal list there where you can sign up. And I just basically, like, once a month, send a very personal sort of like, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I noticed, or like, have you seen this? Like, this is crazy. We should do this better. Message. And yeah, so like, join my crew if you want to get at me. That's a great way to do it. Pen pals on hackyourpractice.lawyer. But really, like, if you want to know if I'm eating chocolate chip cookies today, you should find me on Twitter.
I love it. I love it. Well, one final question that I love asking every guest that comes on is, when you think about, your journey and what that's been like so far, and you think about where you are now, what's two pieces of advice that you would give to someone who is interested in running and growing their law practice? And it could be something that you've already said that you want to reiterate, or it could be two new things.
Oh, two pieces of advice for somebody who wants to start their own practice, or who
Yes.
just is running their own practice? Well, either way, I don't think it actually changes my answer. So the one is just remember that it doesn't have to be perfect before you launch it, whatever it is. I think lawyers, we really get stuck in the, like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, but I have to wait until it's like totally perfect, And I'm a big fan of, like, get it good enough. Pretend it's due at midnight and you have to get it out the door, just like an appellate motion or whatever, right? Sometimes you just have to ship the work, and trust that in your business, you're going to have a chance to iterate, and like, you'll have version 2.0. You'll figure it out where it's broken. Trust me, like, you make something new, you've systematized, you're going to find ways to tweak it. Don't let having it not be perfect stop you. And then I think the second thing is, whenever you're doing that thing where you're like, oh, I can't because ethics, or I can't because whatever, or if I do this, then like, what's the value to the client? A lot of that is just a between the ears problem. And I would tell you to like kind of dig into that feeling more and do the sort of Toyota 3 whys. Like, well, why? Okay, well, because, clients will think that I'm unprofessional. Well, why would that be? And, like, push yourself to really uncover what's really going on for you, because that's what holds you back as a business owner, is your own limiting scripts about why you can't do something. And just sort of like pushing into that and questioning it is a thing that has helped me sort of like, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. And that's where the good stuff happens, right? So just sort of like questioning your own interior scripts, I think, is a big one.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, Jess, thank you for being an amazing guest on the show today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.